Welcome back to the RBR Recap, episode 7, numero 7, lucky number 7. I'm Alex Burgos, joined as always by my co-host, Gabriel Rivas. Gabe, how are you, sir?
I'm doing very well, just driving back from San Diego after spending a week there for Chocolatito-Martinez fight week. So I'm good, not well rested yet, but I drank some coffee and I'm ready to talk.
Most definitely. We're going to jump into that Chocolatito versus Martinez card. It was obviously a lot of action on that card, and we'll jump into that main event. But first, we got to get to what happened on Friday, March 4th. That was a Top Rank on ESPN card. We saw the return of Jose Ramirez. He defeated former two-weight world champion Jose Pedraza by unanimous decision. Scores were 116, 112 three times. That fight was at the Save Mart Center in Fresno, California. So now, in consecutive weeks, we've seen the return of Josh Taylor and now Jose Ramirez. What were your thoughts, Gabe, on Ramirez's first comeback fight after his first loss and falling short from becoming undisputed champion? A lot was made in the buildup just on the production side from Top Rank on his loss to Taylor and how he would look returning and in front of a partisan crowd. How did you think he did?
I wouldn't say it was a dominant performance. He did have the advantage of being in front of a hometown crowd, and he's been at 140 pounds for a lot longer than Pedraza, who had to move up, whereas JC has spent the better part, if not his entire career, at 140 pounds. Pedraza is a slick fighter. He was a world champion for a reason, and it looks like with Gervonta Davis, I know this sounds random, but his knockout win over him is aging really well, because I don't think anyone has looked that dominant as Gervonta Davis did when he knocked him out. JC Ramirez did not look as dominant following, like you said, trying to become undisputed champion at 140 against Josh Taylor. So it wasn't the best performance, but it was a win, and it opens up the door to fighting for vacant titles in the near future.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I was thinking about that same exact thing with the Tank Davis victory, which seems like ages ago, and how dominant he was against Jose Pedraza. And, a lot of times Tank gets, knocked for not having the best resume and getting handpicked fighters. But you got to look at what he did against him and what Pedraza's been able to do after that. I mean, he lost obviously to Lomachenko, but didn't get blown out of the water. I mean, he lost to Ramirez. I thought it was really close. Scores of 116, 112 across the board. I thought it could have been 115, 113. It was really teetering on, even a draw. So Pedraza did really well. I thought at times the ESPN crew was really trying to convince us of something we were seeing that wasn't actually happening. Ramirez was obviously coming forward. And once again, in consecutive weeks, we're talking about the optics of a fight. What Andre Ward talks about. What does it look like when someone's coming forward nonstop and another guy's on his back foot the whole fight? You can win fights that way. You can be a slick counterpuncher. You can box and you can not get hit. Now, Ramirez was obviously in front of his hometown crowd. Not saying he didn't deserve the victory, but it wasn't maybe as dominant as some people would like us to believe. And so I think that it was a good comeback fight for him. He got the win. But now it really starts to get interesting when we start to talk about some of these other guys, Chon Cepeda, Regis Prograis. If Josh Taylor does in fact move up and these belts become, vacant, these are a lot of tough fights for Jose Ramirez that maybe a few years ago you're thinking, oh, well, he's, 1A and 1B. Now, there's guys that are really going to challenge him at the top of that totem pole. And I could see him potentially losing. What are your thoughts on, let's say, a fight, or what would pique your interest most in terms of the top names that he could face? Some of the guys that, we've been mentioning now in a couple successive weeks in Chon Cepeda and Regis Prograis.
At 140 pounds, everyone's going to wait for one man, and that's Josh Taylor. They're going to see what his decision is going to be regarding his career. Is he going to move up to 147 pounds or stay at 140 and defend his undisputed crown? If he decides to move up, all the belts become vacant and things are going to get really interesting. I'd love to see a fight between Chon Cepeda and Ramirez. The first fight ended in a majority decision, very close fight. And I think that Chon Cepeda has looked really good recently and has gotten even better since that first fight. As you mentioned, Regis Prograis would be an excellent fight. And I think that we can really imagine them being in the center of the ring, going toe-to-toe for most of the fight.
Definitely. And I think that plays, more so to Ramirez's strength as opposed to having to track a guy down and really cut off the ring. I didn't think he did really a good job of that. He was kind of just circling and following him around, following Pedraza around on Friday. But again, he got the victory, but there are big time matchups for him. And who knows, maybe, you know, I'm sure Prograis wants another piece of Josh Taylor as well. Maybe, you know, that fight happens a little bit later down the road in Ramirez versus Prograis, and the winner, you know, gets a shot at Josh Taylor. So it will be interesting for sure. Also this weekend on Saturday, March 5 at the Pechanga Arena in San Diego, California, we had arguably the most prolific little man in boxing, Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez, took on the young and dangerous Julio Cesar Martinez. Chocolatito put on a masterful and dominant performance, defeating Martinez by unanimous decision. Scores were 118-110. 117-111 and 116-112, all for Chocolatito. Going into the fight, he was a minus 140 betting favorite, not, you know, super high on the money line. And then Martinez was a plus 110. So it was very interesting going in. A lot of people thought that Martinez, even though he was moving up, would be too powerful, and his motor, being the younger guy, would be too much for Chocolatito. Didn't end up being that case at all. In fact, the motor on Gonzalez was just ridiculous. I mean, I think he threw over 1,000 punches, and just in the last round alone, almost landed 60. The predominant majority of those punches being power punches. I mean, it was just incredible seeing his work. Gabe, you were ringside. You got to speak with him. Talk to us a little bit about. I want to get your opinion first on what you thought of Chocolatito's performance against Martinez.
As you mentioned, it was close in terms of the betting odds going into the fight. And I think that was justified because there are a lot of variables involved. People haven't forgotten the losses to Sor Rungvisai, and also the age factor, I think, really plays a role in determining whether or not people think he's going to win or lose the fight. On the Martinez side, he's young, he's hungry, he's quick, he's powerful. So I can understand why going into the fight, people thought couldn't decide who to pick as their favorite. In the fight, it was a very impressive performance from Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez. The plan appeared to have been to be careful, keep his hands up, see what kind of power that Martinez would bring, and then little by little start applying more pressure. I get the feeling that Chocolatito wanted to stop him, but eventually he was surprised by how much punishment Martinez was able to take, and obviously couldn't get the job done in that sense. But aside from that, it was a masterclass. It was really a boxing clinic, and he won. In his own words, he felt he won at least 11 rounds.
Definitely, yeah. I thought it could have been the one card that was 116 was 12 was a little eye catching. I was scratching my head a little bit. I thought it was more of the 117, 111, 118, 110 variety. So. Definitely a masterful performance, a masterclass, like you mentioned. Now, it really opens up a lot of opportunities now, for Chocolatito. I mean, we have a potential trilogy against Juan Francisco Estrada, which was the original fight that we were supposed to see last night. We've also got Sor Rungvisai, who, even though in that second fight put an exclamation point on that, bit of the rivalry, I mean, that's still maybe something that people would want to see. And I don't know, from Chocolatito's perspective, I always thought Sor Rungvisai was just a little bit too big for him, but I don't know if he would potentially want him to get back or maybe go another direction with fights against maybe Bam Rodriguez, who's one guy that we spoke with last night. Our ringside reporter, Gabriel Avila for RBR Boxing, got a chance to catch up with Rodriguez, and he said they're actually working on a Sor Rungvisai fight.
Well, they're talking about me defending my title against Rungvisai. I would love that fight. I know the fans would love that fight.
Maybe the winner of that fight gets a shot at Chocolatito if Chocolatito wants to wait around. Or, like I said, he's got the Estrada, matchup that he could go for. So I don't know. From your perspective, what do you think should be next or could potentially be next for him?
In his post-fight interview with DAZN and also with the media in the post-fight press conference, he did say that as long as the money is right, he is willing to make fights with anybody at 115 pounds. He's not going to move, but he's willing to stay there. Rungvisai, Cuadras, Estrada, Rodriguez, all of that is on the table as long as the money's right. And of course, he's going to allow Eddie Hearn, Matchroom Boxing, that is, and Taken, who's his co-promoter with Matchroom, to make that decision. Also, from a personal standpoint, he does admit that he's getting closer and closer to retirement, but he could do 3, 4, 5 fights, depending on how he feels and depending on his performances in these upcoming fights. also he's preparing things at home in Nicaragua in terms of his future. I think he wants to make sure that he's stable, he has everything in order so that when he does retire, he can continue living comfortably. So that's why I feel that there's an emphasis on making sure that it's good, well-paying fights in these upcoming potential battles with any of the fighters I just mentioned.
Most definitely. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what he does because there's a lot of options. And obviously he's still got a lot of gas left in the tank. He showed now 2 back-to-back fights where people are still kind of like, I'm not sure if he's like back. No, he's back. And obviously he's not, the youngest anymore, but he's still got more than enough in the tank. I mean, like I had mentioned before, throwing over 1,000 punches, really dominating in that high volume style against a guy in Martinez that you thought maybe could match that just because he's young, powerful. But Martinez early on was baffled and really didn't have an answer. And I thought, you mentioned Chocolatito going for the stoppage. I thought there could have been a stoppage at around the 7th round. Chocolatito was really pouring it on. And then just after that, it was just like a beatdown. And, I will say a little bit, I thought a disservice to the fighter from the corner, because the corner is there to protect their fighter. Obviously, Martinez being proud, having, balls and just does not want to fold. He's going to fight for, as many rounds as you let him go out there. But I thought that, being that he's probably going to move back down, he's got a title to defend, big matchups against, potential Sonny Edwards. There's other things on the docket for him. You don't really need to see him continue to get frustrated. And he was just outclassed. I mean, he's an unorthodox guy. And if you want to, continue to cultivate that style, that's fine. But when you get a guy like Chocolatito, who's just a master technician, I mean, if I could watch that style of boxing every single day, I would. People were texting me like, man, this guy is just so fun to watch. And it is. It's just crazy. Like the little nuances that he does just really makes you appreciate what boxing is all about. And so, facing a guy like that has to be super frustrating. Seeing your charge get, beat down by someone like that can't be a good thing. Sometimes you got to take that, orgullo and, everything and just put it to the side and be like, you know what, let's fight another day. You know what I mean? We have other things and a future ahead of us. So I don't know if you want to mention anything on that, in that aspect of what Martinez was able to bring to the table and maybe like what he has next coming up for him.
Well, the 2 biggest factors, in my opinion, were the technique and the experience. And Roman Chocolatito has a lot of both: short punches, side steps, combinations, and also very, very good defense as well. There are a lot of punches that he was either picking off with his gloves or blocking them. And then with Martinez, if, like you mentioned, if they want to cultivate an unorthodox style, that's fine. But I would rather see him, develop some more orthodox skills, keep his hands up, shorter punches. A lot of times it feels like he punches from his waist, the hands coming from his waist rather than coming from his guard. The footwork could improve. The head movement could improve. I think also in terms of strategy, I'd really like to see Martinez develop his technique because he has all the other things that you're born with: power, a good chin, huevos, as you mentioned. He has all that. Now, if someone could hone that into a very skillful fighter, he could be a Mexican Chocolatito. Same size, you know what I mean? Very, like I mentioned before, he has a good chin, very powerful. If someone could hone his skills, he could really be a dominant force at 112, at 115 pounds. But when you have fighters like Sorumvisai and Estrada and Chocolatito, who are much better technicians than Martinez, it's going to be a tough time for him. And especially when you got an up-and-comer like Bam Rodriguez as well. So either he develops his skills and is able to hone them, or he's going to have a tough time reigning at 112 and becoming a champion in the 150-pound division.
Exactly. Yeah. And just a couple more points on that. I thought it was really, hopefully it'll be a reality check in the sense that he'll try to hone those skills, because I thought, a lot of times he gets away with just going in there, squaring up. And like you said, throwing from the hip, has that natural power and just, knocking these guys out. He may go down. He doesn't care, but he gets right back up and then he just wears these guys down. But as you get higher, and I think you even mentioned something like this last week with the Colbert loss, as you get, higher up in the rankings and you start fighting, these things start to be more important, and you can't get away with them when you're fighting better competition. let alone one of the legends and best fighters ever in Chocolatito Gonzalez. So yeah, it's just like, I think after round one, he saw like, I'm not just going to square up and, get this guy out of here with one punch. He does need to tighten some stuff up and just, small stuff. You can't just be squaring up and just like winging shots the way he was. There's other ways, to win fights instead of just showing your bravado and your toughness. And so I guess that's a little bit of what we're talking about and what we want to see him improve on and kind of put the whole package together.
Martinez has everything that you're born with and that you would want your fighter to have. Powerful, good chin, explosive, and he's also quite charismatic in a very eccentric way. What he needs to do is hone the things that you're not born with, that you can teach and that you can learn. And you know what? That's not a terrible dilemma to be with, because it's a tough spot to spend your whole life developing good technique just to find out in the pros that you don't have a chin or that you don't have power. So I wouldn't mind being in Martinez's spot. Maybe it's a reality check so that he can actually develop those skills that you're not born with and that you can actually learn with a good trainer.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens next from Martinez. A lot of options, obviously, even if he does stay at 115 or if he moves down to defend his title. But next week, we'll be back with another episode. We'll be looking at Lee Wood's championship fight against Michael Conlan, the Conlan Revolution. That's been a long time coming, so he gets his first crack at a title. We'll obviously have some recaps and discussions and opinions there. But for Gabe Rivas, I'm Alex Burgos. Thanks for checking out the RBR Recap.
Thank you for listening to the RBR Recap. Make sure to follow us on social media at RBR Recap and visit RBRRecap.com for the latest episodes.